Good morning, friendly forest friends. Today we are going to read Mr. Hoopeyloops and His Amazing Glass. This is by Andy Can and Fabrice Bertolotto. There was once a town. It was an ordinary town. It was a town of red brick buildings, black roofs, and white trimmed windows. Everything looked the same. All of the townspeople were the same too, except, that is, Mr. Hoopeyloops. Mr. Hoopeyloops was a special man who lived in an old, odd house with an old, odd barn. He drove an old, odd red pickup truck that everyone was quite surprised could actually go. Every so often, Mr. Hoopeyloops would drive his old, odd red truck into town. Then suddenly, while passing by Mr. James' sundry and supply store, that old, odd truck would suddenly screech to a halt, and Mr. Hoopeyloops would leap out. He would rush up to the store windows and look admiringly at the glass. He would then say to the passers-by, "Isn't this glorious? See how the windows shine? See the light dancing on the surface? Glorious, magical," he would say with an awe and wonder. When the passers-by stopped and looked, which was rare, all they saw was the front window display at Mr. James' Sundry and Supply Store. They shook their heads, muttering that Mr. Hoopeyloops is a silly, silly man. After admiring the window, Mr. Hoopeyloops would jump back into his old, odd red truck to go to the sand store. If anyone were watching, but no one was, Mr. Hoopeyloops loaded his truck with sand and occasionally a few small steel pipes and drove down his windy, bumpy country road to his old, odd house with his old, odd barn. Then, if anyone was looking, but no one was, Mr. Hoopeyloops would drive the old, odd red truck into the barn and one by one hoist the sandbags over his shoulder and unload them into the barn. He would then disappear into the barn for days at a time. Smoke curled out of the barn's big fireplace, and sounds of strange and compelling music drifted from the barn. As time went by, townspeople became accustomed to Mr. Hoopeyloops' odd behavior. Sometimes, instead of commenting on Mr. James' store windows, he would notice ordinary things and exclaim with delight about a balloon's color, or a candy cane's bend, or an ordinary kitchen bowl's graceful curve. Then he would go to the sand store and load up his old, odd truck with sand and drive down his windy, bumpy country road to his old, odd house with its old, odd barn. What do you think he's doing with all that sand? The townspeople would point, whisper, and crinkle their foreheads at Mr. Hoopeyloops. However, as Mr. Hoopeyloops kept noticing and watching, he also kept loading that sand. The townspeople just shook their heads and continued their ordinary lives. One day, after enough time had passed, everyone in town received an invitation. It was shaped like his barn, but had a question mark on the outside. When the invitation was opened, and every one of them was, it simply said, "Please come and see the wonders and magic that delight me." What do you think they're going to see? The townspeople scratched their heads. What in the world did it mean? They asked one another. They did not understand, but they all intended to accept his invitation. The day finally dawned for Mr. Hoopeyloops' event. Everyone was aflutter with excitement. When the time came, the townspeople left their ordinary houses, sat in their ordinary cars, and drove down that windy, bumpy country road to the odd-looking barn and the odd-looking house. When the first townspeople arrived, Mr. Hoopeyloops asked them to wait just outside the barn until everyone arrived. Soon enough, everyone did. As they waited outside the old odd barn, the townspeople wondered what they were about to see. What was going to happen? Then the moment arrived. While graceful lyrical music filled the air, Mr. Hoopeyloops slowly and purposefully slid open the large barn doors to reveal an absolute wonder. The townspeople whispered, spoke in hushed tones, and squealed with delight as they slowly moved through the barn. And then, one by one, the townspeople began to clap for Mr. Hoopeyloops. For Hoops, as the townspeople now affectionately called him, had used sand, pipes, and a fireplace to make exquisite, colorful, beautiful glass. Bowls, balloons, candy canes, leaves, trees, wonder-filled, magical, beautiful glass that lit the barn with joy and color. After that day, when people saw Hoops in town, they greeted him with joy and kindness, tinged with wonder and respect. The beautiful storefront windows, gleaming just so, reminded the townspeople of the lovely surprise created by Mr. Hoopeyloops, a unique man who made their lives a bit more magical. And as they went about their ordinary lives, they now saw the extraordinary in the ordinary. So what was Mr. Hoopeyloops' career? So he used sand, pipes, and a furnace to make glass. So he's a glass maker. So what careers do your parents do? And are they like the ones you want to be when you grow up? Let me know. Also, I encourage everyone, when everything gets better outside and we all can go out a little more, to check out The Works. It's in Newark, and they have a glass shop. It's really cool to see, so you guys can actually see someone make glass. That would be really cool. Until next time, I wish you well. Bye, guys.